Hello, everybody. Hi, Wardove. Hi, Blue. Hi, Tina. How is everybody doing? I was just looking back at the last chapter, because I feel like I kind of forgot what was happening. But then I was like, oh yeah, we're learning about the founding of the Liao Kingdom. That's kind of a big deal. Oh, hi, lovely. Oh my god, thank you. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Hi, Henry. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna get started. We are on page 65, which is chapter 72, and it's called Yesteryear Defeat, which is a really interesting chapter title. It was because of Hua Po-an. What did Hua Po-an do? Asked Gumong. After founding the Liao Kingdom, he delved into the ancient writings of the demon race and used other unorthodox methods to hatch a demon blood beast of devastating power. A demon blood beast. Indeed, Moshi said. This demon blood beast possessed terrifying abilities. Once it grew and matured, it threatened to swallow the entire population of Chonghua in a matter of days. Gumong's blue eyes widened. Then what did they do? It happened too quickly. The nation's forces were helpless in the face of it. Moshi paused briefly. The only person in Chonghua who understood Hua Po-an's spiritual techniques was Chen Tong. He felt every kind of regret and shame at having taught Hua Po-an magic, and believed it was his failure of judgment that had led Chonghua to this calamity. Thus, in the final battle with Hua Po-an, he chose to die with the demon, using his own spiritual core and souls to seal and slay the demon blood beast. Gumong was caught in his words as if in a trance. In his mind's eye, he could almost see Preceptor Chen colliding with the demon blood beast's spiritual power, their spells arcing and exploding across the battlefield. Chen Tong met his end with a destroyed core and a consumed corpse, Moshi said. Forget ascending as an immortal. His souls and those of the demon beasts perished together. Reincarnation isn't even a possibility. So there's no way you could have seen the wise gentleman. Moshi met Gumong's azure gaze. You probably met someone who looked like him. Gumong lowered his head, but... He hesitated for a long while, but no words came. After a long beat, he could only concede haltingly. Probably, then. In the days after he heard this story, Gumong became somewhat absent-minded. His dreams were full of scattered reflections. Sometimes they were things he'd dreamed about before. Sometimes the scenes were completely new. Sometimes he even dreamed of Preceptor Chen Tong from the story. Clad in snow-white robes, the man from the painting stood amid flower petals raining from the sky. Gumong couldn't quite make out the man's face, but he was vaguely aware that this was indeed Chen Tong. Yet when he tried to step closer to see his features more clearly, the falling haitong blossoms turned into a great deluge of blood. Chen Tong's voice was dark, filled with resentment, disappointment, heartbreak, hatred. Traitor, he said, how could you be worthy? Traitor, when did Chonghua ever do you wrong? When did I ever do you wrong? Every word seemed to weep blood. Traitor, traitor. Gumong stared blankly. He didn't know why he would dream of Chen Tong, or why Chen Tong would speak to him thus. Still, he thought, why had he committed treason? He writhed in misery, his thoughts a roil. Under Chen Tong's questioning, his dream self knelt, clutching his head. Why had he committed treason? The vision shattered. Chen Tong and the bloody rain dispersed. Gumong slowly raised his head to find he was kneeling in the throne room, covered in filth and weeping in sorrow. Up on the throne, the emperor's expression was one of apathy. Within the hall, ridicule was written on the official. A soul boiling in the bloody pits of Asura hell, ceaselessly slamming his forehead against the ground as he kowtowed. Please, just let us build gravestones. Please, I'm begging. There are too many dead. There are really too many dead. Your Imperial Majesty, Marquis, I beg of you. This nightmare plagued him for days. On the evening of the 4th, the situation became dire. Even dinner couldn't lift Gumong's spirits. He sat on his little stool, chewing on his chopsticks as he stared into space. Since Princess Mengzi's visit, Gumong had stopped sitting in the seat across from Mo Xi. Li Wei would bring a small stool for a seat and bench for a table, and Gumong would hunch over to eat there. Each day, Mo Xi directed the servants to send Gumong food from his table, using excuses like, "This doesn't taste good, I don't want it," or "It's too much, I can't finish it." Gumong would happily take the offending morsel off Mo Xi's hands. Today was no different. Mo Xi picked at his food before pointing at the roast goose on the table, the sweet and sour crispy meats, and steamed perch. "Give these to him," he said to Li Wei, clearly referring to Gumong, who was sitting at his little bench. Gumong had been well behaved recently. He had long ago learned to say thank you after receiving each dish. But today, Gumong didn't say anything. He stared with empty dishes before him, not even the ghost of happiness appearing on his face. Mo Xi dismissed the servants and took a couple mouthfuls of hot soup. "Your eyes used to light up at the mere sight of a pork bun. Now you have all sorts of meat before you, but you don't speak a word of praise." Gumong turned his head, hands clasped around a meat pie. "I'm thinking." "What are you thinking about?" Gumong lowered his head. "I've been thinking all day about why I would defect," he said in a muffled voice. Mo Xi was still for a moment. "I've told you before, Liu Jianxing was the fuse, and your ambition was the gunpowder. His Imperial Majesty stripped you of authority, but you refused to bend the knee." "But," Gumong said softly, "but I remember, it seems like many people died." Startled, Mo Xi looked up, a chill in his expression. "I only remember a little," said Gumong. "I remember kneeling in the Great Hall. I kept kowtowing, begging you all for leniency, but no one listened to me," he murmured. Mo Xi was silent for a long while. A question issued from his mouth, deep and low, burdened with accumulated suffering. "Yesterday," Gumong answered. "Is something wrong?" Mo Xi's heart pounded, his eyes flashing with complicated feeling. He hadn't expected that Gumong would recover this scrap of memory. Even if Gumong didn't understand the context of that scene, this information would be enough to shock all of Chonghua. It was this dispute in the throne room that had led Gumong to lose faith, and it was difficult to judge who had been in the right. Oh, are we losing audio? What's happening? I don't see an issue on my end or, anything with the stream that should be causing that. Is it still happening? Oh. Happened before? I don't really... I don't know why I would do that. All my settings and everything are the same. Okay. Weird. Let me see if, like, my mic is plugged in all the way. Be right back. Oh. Okay. It's definitely plugged in. I'm gonna read a tiny bit more and just, like, tell me if it happens again. I guess if it does, I could restart, like, my program on my end without ending the stream. I think I can do that. But let me just see. Where are we? I lost my place. Oh, yeah. If Gumong recovered this memory alone from among his destroyed recollections, he would be prone to develop hatred and the desire for vengeance against the nobles of Changhua. Moshi? After a moment's silence, Moshi decided to speak frankly. Firstly, he disliked lying. Secondly, telling Gumong everything from the start might at least prepare him for the truth. Listen, Gumong, this matter is not as simple as you think. No matter what memories you recover related to this, you must come to me for an explanation first. Don't try to guess anything on your own. Gumong nodded. After a while, he raised his hand. Then I have something to ask right now. Go ahead. When I was kneeling in the Great Hall, was I begging for mercy for Liu Jianxing? Not entirely, Moshi replied. Moshi hadn't personally witnessed this confrontation at court. When Gumong returned to the capital to make his report, Moshi had still been on the battlefields at the western frontier, unable to extricate himself. He had only learned what happened later from watching the Imperial Scribe's history mirror. All he knew was that Liu Jianxing, Gumong, and Mu Ronglian had led the army to Phoenix Cry Mountain, where Gumong had split off from the others. Gumong had gone directly to the hinterlands of the Liao Kingdom's southernmost city, while Liu Jianxing and Mu Ronglian kept watch over their troops. It should have been a flawless plan, if not for Liu Jianxing's quick temper. An envoy from a neutral country started an argument with him. In the heat of the moment, Liu Jianxing beheaded the envoy. Was it happening again, or is the audio good? Yeah, Henry, I also think he kind of deserves the vengeance, considering everything. But it's kind of... Yeah, I guess the question is, like... Maybe he took it too far? Okay, awesome. This third country immediately sided with the Liao Kingdom as a result, and attacked Chonghua's encampment from behind Phoenix Cry Mountain. Disaster befell Chonghua's armies. At the time, Gumong had been personally leading his troops on the front lines. They had planned to infiltrate enemy ranks and splinter the Liao Kingdom's power from within. However, this effort was unsustainable for long. By the third day, Mu Ronglian's imperial army was meant to rush over to reinforce their numbers. Then, coordinating the offensive from within and without the enemy forces, they would be poised to break through in one blow. But thanks to Liu Jianxing's rash action, Murong Lian's troops were diverted into fighting the third country and couldn't provide assistance. Gumong bitterly waited for reinforcements that never came, and their original plan of attack became a fatal dead end. When the besieged Gumong learned that the Third Nation had allied with the Liao Kingdom because Liu Jianxing killed their envoy, he burst out cursing in indignation and sorrow. Liu Jianxing, are you fucking trying to kill me? Why the fuck are you so stupid? How selfish can you be? How selfish can you be? But what use were his complaints? 100,000 soldiers had put their lives on the line with Gumong. They'd come from nothing to reach the heights of fathomless glory at his side. But overnight, they were annihilated. How many of them would return in one piece? At that time, Gumong could think of nothing else. When he was done cursing, he wiped his tears and clenched his teeth, setting his shattered heart on fire to light the way home for those 100,000 brothers. He counted each and every one, every man he kept alive, every man he brought back to their homeland. In so many battles, Gumong had fought for victory. This time, he fought to go home. Yeah, War Dove, I also think the Liao Kingdom had a lot to do with whatever the heck happened. Like, I think Gumong deserved to get some kind of revenge, but I don't think it was really him operating the vehicle, so to speak. Yeah, pros moment, for real. Later, he realized that the one at fault in this campaign hadn't been Liu Jianxing. It had been him. He was well aware of Liu Jianxing's fiery temper, but he'd still believed this brother of his could handle such a weighty responsibility. It was Gumong who had made an outrageous mistake, who had erred beyond belief. Gumong had no intention of absolving himself of responsibility. He had been prepared to make penance with his own death, but he couldn't let his 100,000 comrades be tarred with the same brush. The mistake had been his. All who had lost their lives and shed their blood, they were innocent. They deserved respect. They shouldn't be erased. He was willing to sacrifice all he had achieved so those brothers who died in vain could receive a gravestone with their names on it. It was he who led them to their deaths. Whenever he closed his eyes, he recalled those humble names, those dirty, smiling faces, their eyes shining with boundless trust. Some of the cultivators were so young, barely 15 years old, dressed in shabby clothes, their voices full of reverence and hope when they called him General Gu. General Gu. General Gu. Each cry echoed. Each word was stained with blood. Was he worthy? He wasn't. The General Gu they admired was a useless good-for-nothing who cared only for the code of brotherhood. He'd led them to die in glorious deaths on the battlefield. He simply couldn't let them go to their graves without even a name. So he begged. He knelt at the foot of the throne, covered in blood and filth, mud streaking his face, and he begged. Please, give them a name. I'll take all of the blame myself. Give them a gravestone. An army's defeat is the fault of the commander. The soldiers are blameless. Please, I'm begging you. But His Imperial Majesty refused, and the hall full of onlookers sneered at his grief. He was like the lowly hegemon king who had finally reached the battlefields of Gaixia on the eve of his defeat. I don't know if I pronounced that right. What did his enemy, Liu Bang, care if he was alone and doomed? Oh, there is a footnote. Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, was a prominent warlord who fought Liu Bang, eventual founding emperor of the Han Dynasty, and was defeated at the Battle of Gaixia. he committed suicide in disgrace. They wanted nothing more than to hand him that fatal sword. Their eyes flashed red, and they longed to see him bare his neck for the blade. Only when he was dead would they be at ease. Only then could they be sure that there wouldn't be another slave in this century who would upend the heavens and tread upon the heads of the aristocracy. No few of the onlookers brimmed with secret delight, practically on the verge of clapping and cheering at Lu Jianxing's error. For without this defeat, how else could they have brought Gumong and his slave army to heel? The timing couldn't have been more perfect. There will be no gravestones, no state funeral. Deputy General Lu Jianxing will be interrogated and executed at the end of autumn. General Gu will be stripped of his military rank. The remaining soldiers will be provisionally detained to prevent any violence. This was the emperor's final judgment and punishment. Battlefields were fickle things. There was no such thing as a god of war who could weather 100 battles unscathed. Mu Ronglian, Yue Chunqing, and Mo Shi could afford to lose battles because they stood shoulder to shoulder with imperial power. The same noble blood ran in their veins. It was only Gumong who couldn't. He needed to fail, but once, for these powerful officials to come swarming, trampling over him so he could never rise again, nor lift his head. So the emperor's refusal was quite correct. The callous voice that floated down from the imperial throne became the final straw that broke Gumong. It is at our mercy that you keep your life. You are standing here today because of the late emperor's divine grace. Do you think your life is worth the cost of a formal burial for these defeated troops? You have no right to discuss it with me. Thus was Gumong's last attempt and only plea mercilessly dismissed by the emperor before the watching court. He couldn't honor his promise in the end. The dead were denied grave inscriptions. The living were taken into custody. And Gumong's brother-in-arms had his head lopped off and his corpse displayed at the Eastern Market for 3 days and nights. He lost everything in the blink of an eye. Mo Shi had been far from the imperial capital during all of this. By the time he held up the history mirror and saw what happened... Sorry, just, what, like a history mirror? Is that a real thing we're talking about? By the time he held up the history mirror and saw what had happened, by the time he saw Gumong slamming his head into the ground until it was bloody, sobbing as he knelt and cowered, plummeting from hope to despair, from impassioned pleading to despondent silence, by the time he saw all of this, Gumong had already left the capital. Everything was already over. Perhaps his obsession ran too deep. Mo Shi dreamed of the sight for years. He dreamed of Gumong howling in grief, smashing his head against the floor in heartbreak. The palace hall filled with the mocking faces of court officials, and the emperor handing down his verdict without mercy. In Mo Shi's dreams, he would often be in the hall too. Perhaps because he'd always thought that everything might have gone differently had he been there. Or perhaps none of this would have happened if, after Mo Shi returned to the capital, he had noticed Gumong's growing desire to defect. What a fool he had been. He had seen clearly Gumong's deterioration and heartbreak when he returned from the front lines. But Gumong then had seemed so listless, like he might spend the rest of his life in a morose stupor. Mo Shi had feared that Gumong wouldn't be able to get back on his feet, but he'd never thought that Gumong would defect. He'd never imagined that Gumong could defect. Gumong had always been like a god to him. Mo Shi had been so young then. How could he know that even gods could crumble and collapse? He had thought Gumong invincible. When he considered that righteous, enthusiastic, smiling Shixiong, the Shixiong whom nothing could break, the General Gu, who could endure any misery, Mo Shi simply couldn't believe that Gumong's heart had died in that throne room, that it had shattered into fragments and been crushed to dust, never to be put whole again. Actually, I couldn't argue when you left and defected, said Mo Shi. But out of all the 9 provinces and 28 nations, why did you have to choose the darkest one? Gumong didn't immediately respond. After a lengthy pause, he said, I don't know. He was struggling to relate to his former self in the story Mo Shi had told. His mind was in a mess. He could perhaps understand the despair he felt and the motives he had, but it was just as Mo Shi said. He couldn't understand why he'd gone to Liao. What could he do in the Liao kingdom? Forced to guess, he could only believe it was for revenge. The Liao kingdom alone could give him the requital he wanted. If he made a name for himself in the Liao kingdom, he could avenge himself upon the emperor who had humiliated him, had disdained him. But if that were the truth, he would really be as Mo Shi said, a person fighting only for his own ideals and vengeance, regardless of how much blood he shed. Gumong buried his face in his palms, then clutched at his hair in confusion. I don't know, he mumbled. I can't think of another reason either. Neither can I. Gumong, you had your code of brotherhood and your unbreakable promise, and I have mine, Mo Shi said. Since you chose revenge, then you and Chonghua, are destined for this sort of end. Gumong sat disconsolately on his little stool without a word. He vacantly stared at the brick flooring in front of him through his fingers. At last, Mo Shi stood up. You should take 2 more doses of calming medicine today. His Imperial Majesty wouldn't want you to remember too many details about your defection. If you want to live a little longer, don't think on these things again. You know, I actually want him to remember. That's the end of the chapter. Early CCTV. Yeah. Blue Meat Bun really is saying that we should eat the rich and powerful. Yes. Yeah, we just learned some, like, crazy lore in this chapter. For some reason I thought, and they might have not really mentioned it, or I might have just forgotten, but I thought that Mo Shi had been there when Gumong was, like, making his pleas to the emperor. So that took me off guard, and then I was like, a time mirror? A past mirror? What did they call it? Anyway, that just kind of broke my brain a little. Okay, we're on chapter 73, called Chuyi the Beauty. Since Mo Shi had put it like that, Gumong tried his best to avoid recalling details from before he defected. This was sometimes the way of things. After the momentary satisfaction of uncovering a secret, endless disappointment and frustration came in its wake. He wanted to enjoy his life, so it was best to remain obedient. Mo Shi grew busier after the spring hunt in March. Overwhelmed with work, his routines disappeared and his appetite worsened. Seeing him neglect sleep and skip meals, Housekeeper Lee ordered the kitchen to bring boxes of food to his desk. However, Mo Shi still often forgot to eat, or would find the food cold by the time he finally raised his head from his heap of scrolls, long after the sun had gone down. This happens every year around this time, Li Wei sighed. There's no point in cajoling him. He eats cold food and drinks old tea all day. Even an iron stomach wouldn't tolerate it. He's just asking to get sick. Housekeeper Lee seemed to have jinxed it. The day after he complained, Moshi fell ill. Never mind how ruthless Moshi was while at war. Only the servants of Shiha Manor knew how high maintenance he became whenever he got sick. It wasn't that he was fragile, or that he inconvenienced others, or made a big deal of his illnesses. There was a much more insufferable issue. He was picky. He kept up his usual activities, like attending court and annotating papers, but his temper worsened with his discomfort, and he became even more particular about everything than usual. When Moshi's stomach issues flared up again, Li Wei went to Medicine Master Jiang for a prescription, and Medicine Master Jiang lambasted him with everything he had. He's sick again? Another stomach bug? He's seen me for this problem since he was 14. I take such pains to fix him up, but he couldn't care less. He starts forgetting meals or eats nothing but cold food every year when military affairs get busy. If he keeps going like this, he may as well ascend and be done with it. Maybe he doesn't mind suffering, but I certainly mind him wrecking my reputation. Get out. Li Wei could only nod, sweat beading on his forehead. He somehow managed to extract the prescription between bouts of Medicine Master Jiang's ranting, but he was met with one further command. Keep an eye on that lord of yours. Make sure he eats his food while it's hot and has soup before each meal. And if he doesn't listen, don't come to Jiang Manor again. It's too fucking embarrassing. Thus, Li Wei instructed the kitchen to make soup every day to aid Moshi's recovery. It was at this precise moment that Moshi's fussiness reared its head. On the first day, the kitchens made white radish and pork rib soup. Moshi wouldn't drink it. It's too greasy. On the second day, the kitchens made pigeon soup instead. Moshi refused it. There's a weird aftertaste. On the third day, the kitchens tried making pig liver and spinach soup. Moshi wouldn't touch it. Seeing offal turns my stomach. And so on and so forth, until the seventh day. Li Wei walked dejectedly out of Shiha Jun's study with a pot of straw mushroom and chicken soup in his hands. The master cook who had accompanied him apprehensively asked, "How did it go?" "He didn't touch it at all. He's too busy looking at his sand table." Li Wei rolled his eyes. He said the smell of stewed chicken makes him nauseous and he doesn't have an appetite. Sweaty and pale, the cook felt deeply chagrined. That's not my fault. If the Lord carries on like this, his appetite will only get worse. Didn't Medicine Master Jiang say so too? Healing that stomach of his is more about nurture than medicine. Li Wei sighed. Yes, exactly. Moshi's appetite had indeed worsened over the past few days, but he didn't pay it much mind. As long as something was edible, whether it was hot or cold didn't matter to him, even if the food in question was a rock-hard bun. He'd have time to recover once this busy period was over. While Li Wei and the cook were heaving deep sighs under the eaves, Gumong happened to walk past the courtyard with his arms tucked in his sleeves and the black dog Fando at his heels. Noticing the worry creasing their faces, he asked helpfully, "What's up with you two?" The cook gave him a scornful look. "Are you done chopping firewood? If not, get to it. Don't meddle in the business of others." "I'm done," Gumong said. The cook was about to retort when Li Wei was struck by inspiration. Gumong's cooking wasn't bad. That's what I was thinking. Although Moshi hadn't offered any words of praise the last time he cooked, every plate had come back clean. They were in a dire situation, so why not fall back on their last resort? So thinking, Li Wei succinctly summarized Moshi's situation for Gumong. "Oh," Gumong glanced at the study. "No wonder his face has gotten thinner recently." He looked down and addressed the dog. "Fando, soon he'll be even skinnier than you." Fando barked twice, as though he resented the comparison. Li Wei sighed again. "We've already tried anything and everything to convince him to eat. We've offered every kind of exotic delicacy, but the Lord just never has an appetite, and he's never in the mood to eat either. He carefully watched Gumong's face as he said his next words. "Why don't you try?" "This guy?" the cook interrupted, dripping disdain. "What can he possibly do?" But Gumong nodded. "He can't keep starving himself. I'll give it a try." Gumong planned to cook fish, so he needed the plumpest, freshest fish. Li Wei pointed him toward Peach Blossom Lake on the eastern outskirts of the capital. Not only was the lake flourishing with spiritual energy, which was good for cultivation, but the fish within it were known to be deliciously tender. So that afternoon, with his fishing gear in tow, a net strapped to his back, and his black dog at his heels, Gumong went to the city outskirts to fish. Peach Blossom Lake wasn't difficult to find. When Gumong arrived, he found it profoundly quiet and calm. Due to the endless flow of spirit energy veins, peach blossom petals fluttered all year round, dyeing everything between the heavens and earth the rosy pink of clouds at sunset. Numerous craggy boulders protruded from the lake's surface, and though it wasn't large, it had a great many hidden nooks and crannies. Pavilions and walkways lined its shores, and every errant breeze sent flowers drifting across the steps. "Nice place," Gumong said. No wonder Li Wei said it was good for baths. He turned to the dog. "Fondo, do you want to take one?" Fondo excitedly wagged his tail and leapt into the water like an arrow loosed from a bow. It was yet late spring, but the days were already warm with the sun shining so brightly. Gumong had planned to disguise himself with a hat and cloak, but since he was alone, and it would be difficult to catch fish while bundled up, he took off his shoes, socks, and cloak, then rolled up his pants to wade into the clear lake water. "Arf!" Fondo barked loudly in excitement. He gamboled and scampered around Gumong in the shallows, splashing water everywhere. Gumong brought a finger to his lips. "Behave," he warned the dog. "Go catch a fish for the poor Princess Moshi." Fondo barked and yelped as he cavorted about with even greater enthusiasm, chasing all of the fish from the shallows into the depths. Gumong was rendered speechless. "Arf, arf, arf. If you keep making a nuisance of yourself, I'll make you into dog soup. See if I don't." A gentle approach was useless. Fondo fell in line as soon as Gumong got tough, the way he remembered he used to be. Fondo whimpered and tucked his tail between his legs, trembling with fear as he scrambled ashore. He vigorously shook the water from his fur and sat on the banks to soak up the sunlight, tongue lolling and beady eyes fixed on Gumong. Gumong's martial arts had recovered a great deal, but his spiritual energy could never return to its level at the peak of his abilities. Nonetheless, thanks to his improved martial skills, he caught 3 plump and meaty grass carp in no time at all. Grass carp were big, but they weren't the best for cooking. After some consideration, Gumong took up his net and made his way around some rocks that loomed out of the water to look for fish in other parts of Peach Blossom Lake. There's art. Let's look at the art. He's fishing. Oh, and the dog is in the background with the fish. I mean, did y'all see Fondo? Sorry, he's like in the crease of the page. He's so cute. His mind could be quite sharp sometimes, but it could be dull indeed at others. For example, at this moment, his thoughts turned sluggish and simple-minded. He yelled, "Fish, fish, come here, fishies," splashing through the water at every step. Even the fish in the distance vanished when they heard his clumsy movements. Gumong brushed away some green vines dangling over the rocky crags and turned a corner. "Fish, come quick." "Who's there?" The voice that called out was as beautiful as Kunshan jade and richly melodious, yet with a vicious note of threat. Gumong jumped in fright and turned unthinking to look toward the speaker. He saw a flash of golden light the instant before a spell exploded on the water's surface, inches from his knees. Amid the haze of its thunderous splash, a white-clad silhouette soared over the waterfall. Beads of water flew up to join the crashing cascade. When the pillar of water thrown up by the spell finally dispersed, Gumong, still coughing, heard that crisp, menacing voice say, "Look up." Gumong mopped the water from his face and squinted in the direction of the speaker. If the memories he'd regained to this point were anything to go by, people who flew into an embarrassed rage upon being caught bathing in the depths of a peach blossom pool were generally great beauties. Gumong's strong and innate sense of chivalry hadn't diminished a jot, so he hastily said, "Miss, I'm so sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. I just came to fit." Before he could finish the word, a stream of water shot out and slapped him squarely across the face. Caught off guard, Gumong was knocked straight back into the lake by the force of that purported beauty's stunning blow. After swallowing several mouthfuls of lake water, he managed to stagger upright once more. The beauty's voice was bone-chillingly cold. "Open your damn eyes and take a good look at whom you are speaking to." I do want to look, Gumong thought, but it's inappropriate for men and women to get too close. It's better if I don't. But then he thought, no, you're the one who invited me to take a look, so I'll seem guilty if I don't. Only then did he wonder, why does this voice sound familiar? Bracing himself against the wet stone wall, Gumong shook his dripping head much like Fando. Then he opened his clear blue eyes and looked toward the boulder outside the waterfall's cave. He was rendered wholly speechless. The speaker was beautiful to be sure, but unfortunately it was a man. And not only that, one Gumong knew. Murong Chuyi. This man had the same hang-up as Mo Shi. He didn't like to fully disrobe when bathing and preferred to enter the water wearing a bathrobe. By now, he had already draped a second white robe over his sodden garment. Beneath his sharp, inky brows, his phoenix eyes were lowered, his gaze colder than the waters of Peach Blossom Lake. After a few beats of silence, Gumong cupped his hands in greeting. "Sorry, Daga. Pardon me." "Hold it," Murong Chuyi said, tone frosty. "Is there something else, Daga?" Murong Chuyi raised a hand and tapped a finger upon his clothes. A fiery glow sprang to life at the tip of his pale, slender finger. Under this brilliant light, his wet clothes were dried in a flash. Murong Chuyi sat on a boulder and shot Gumong a glance. "Come here. We're both men here, and it was just a look. No one got taken advantage of," Gumong faltered. "If you're upset, why don't I... After racking his brains, Gumong tentatively offered, "Why don't I strip and let you see too?" Murong Chuyi glared with his phoenix eyes. "Who wants to see you? Come here." Gumong had little choice but to do as he was bid. His qinggong wasn't as good as Murong Chuyi's, so he was compelled to climb the tall and slippery stone platform on all fours. He slipped a couple times before pathetically clambering upward. At no point during this process did Murong Chuyi offer him a hand. Once he reached the top, he approached Murong Chuyi. It wasn't until he was up close that Gumong noted how pale Murong Chuyi's face was. Even his lips were bloodless. Gumong couldn't help but stare. "What happened to you?" Murong Chuyi closed his eyes. Go to Jiang Manor." Gumong was utterly lost. Why would I go to Jiang Manor? "Ask Jiang Fuli for some heart balm. Bring it back to me." Not even a "will you?" or "please?" Gumong took this to mean that the errand was another one of his chores. He nodded once and turned to leave. It was only after walking quite a distance that the other shoe dropped, and he turned in puzzlement. "Wait a minute. Why do you want me to do this?" "Because you happened to pass by," Murong Chuyi replied. This man spoke like those crazy Taoists in the stories who would say upon bumping into a youthful warrior, "Young friend, fate has brought us together. Come to the mountains with me and learn cultivation," before dragging the hapless youth with them all over all protestations. Gumong sulked. "It's not like I owe you anything, and you just hit me. Why should I help you?" Light sparked at Murong Chuyi's fingertips. His expression was ferocious, as if he was about to lash out with another ruthless strike. He glared icily. "Are you going or not?" Gumong shook his head. A true man can be corrupted by neither wealth nor power. Huh? What's wrong? The light at Murong Chuyi's fingertips had winked out. Murong Chuyi lowered his head and held his sleeve to his mouth as he coughed up bloody spittle. "You're sick," Gumong exclaimed. Murong Chuyi was obviously struggling to maintain his poise, but when he tried to speak again, he choked on a great mouthful of dark blood. You must not tell Yue Manor." Pausing, he panted a few times, eyes flashing with stubbornness, "that I was cultivating here. I must not tell Yue Manor?" Murong Chuyi was thoroughly weakened, but his expression and bearing were still as keen as ever. "Never," he gasped. Gumong was silent. "Promise me." Gumong seemed to be stupefied by this man's imperious air. His head moved to nod before realizing he was doing it. The second Gumong gave his assent, Murong Chuyi collapsed like a bow drawn too taut, his willpower dissolving the moment he had Gumong's word. Eyes fluttering shut, he crumpled atop the damp, frigid boulder and passed out cold. Speechless, Gumong stared blankly at him. After a long while, he bent down and prodded at Murong Chuyi's cheek. His pale, thin visage was cool as stone to the touch, unnerving yet pitiable in a way that was difficult to describe. Gumong swallowed nervously. "I'll go get you medicine right now, okay? Don't just faint like that, bro." Why did he say bro? That's the end of the chapter. My theory is that this is literally an ancestor of Chuaning. Like, I'm not, like, it has to be. There's a Chu in his name, and the way he is, everything, it has to be. And Moshi is definitely an ancestor of Moron. I am currently sticking to that theory. We're on chapter 74, which is called Primal Desire. Heart Balm. Inside the medicine master's manor, Jiang Fuli set down the scroll in his hands and raised his almond eyes to study Gumong, who was soaked to the bone and still had a fishing net strapped to his back. "Who do you want this for, Moshi or Murong Lian?" Murong... He stopped himself, remembering the request Murong Chuyi had made right before passing out. Gumong knew a gentleman's word was gold. He had nodded to Murong Chuyi, so he had to do as he promised. "Not gonna tell you," he said instead. Jiang Fuli narrowed his eyes. "Do you know what kind of substance this is?" "Yeah, it's for healing." "It can heal, yes, but it can also harm," Jiang Fuli said. "Heart balm is a plant that's half demonic in nature. Although it can be used to dull pain, its toxicity cannot be underestimated. I have piles of it in my storerooms. It's not particularly precious, so I don't mind giving you some, but..." Gumong raised his hand. "I swear I won't use it to poison people." Jiang Fuli scoffed. "Poison people? While I'm right here in Changhua? If you dare get up to trouble where I can see, I'll respect you as a man of courage." "Then what did you say but for?" "But I will tell your Lord Shihajun that you asked me for heart balm." Gumong thought it over. Murong Chuyi was still unconscious, so saving him was of utmost urgency. Once Gumong brought him back to life, he could explain all of this to Murong Chuyi. So he assented. He followed Jiang Fuli to the storeroom to fetch the herb, waited as Jiang Fuli prepared it, then took the jar of medicine back into the recesses of Peach Blossom Lake with all speed. Murong Chuyi was still lying where he'd fallen. He didn't look well at all. His elegant face was devoid of color, and his skin was ice-cold to the touch. Gumong lifted him into a sitting position, opened the jar, and slowly began to pour the medicine into Murong Chuyi's mouth. This process proved difficult. Although unconscious, Murong Chuyi still coughed from time to time. He got half the medicine down and choked on the other, brows knitted as he muttered unintelligibly. Gumong heard him call for his older sister, then say Yue Chunqing's name, his expression pained throughout. Gumong wasn't close with Murong Chuyi, but his compassion still won in the end. He stroked Murong Chuyi's hair and soothed him with gentle words. "Jie," Murong Chuyi murmured. To which Gumong said, "Jie's here. There now, there now." "Chunqing," Murong Chuyi muttered. To which Gumong said, "Yep, I'm that little white bird." "There now, fourth uncle. Here, there's still a little medicine left." Toward the end, Murong Chuyi's colorless lips trembled, as if he were gripped by a nightmare. He clutched Gumong's sleeves, his eyes flickering restlessly beneath their lids, long lashes fluttering like the wings of a swallowtail butterfly. "No, don't." "What? You?" Murong Chuyi's entire arm was spasming. Tendons stood out in his elegant hand. "You bastard! How could you? You..." Stunned, Gumong rubbed his own nose in dejection. "I'm obviously trying to help. Why are you being so mean and cursing at me?" But Murong Chuyi was still trapped in his nightmare. His pale knuckles grew paler still, and he suddenly let out a muted grunt, as if he'd endured some pain or humiliation in the dream. The outer corners of his tightly shut eyes reddened. "Bastard." Gumong looked at him and sighed. "Who are you cursing? Your sister or the little white bird?" Of course Murong Chuyi didn't answer. Gumong stayed with him for a while longer. Eventually, Murong Chuyi's mumbling died down. In the time it took to burn a stick of incense, he stopped speaking altogether. The heart balm medicine had begun to take effect. His features slowly relaxed, and the crease between his brows smoothed. Gumong half carried and half dragged him to a dry patch on the stone platform and laid him down so he could rest more comfortably. Then he put his chin in his hands and sighed in boredom. "I fed you the plant, so when will you wake up?" Murong Chuyi gave no response. Gumong continued waiting for another long interval. Murong Chuyi's eyes remained firmly closed. He showed no sign of waking. Gumong sighed again, face propped in a hand as he studied Murong Chuyi. Murong Chuyi was a rare beauty indeed, refined and handsome, with stunning looks. Gumong wasn't well read. He didn't have the words to describe what he saw in detail. He just felt that, despite the severe lines of Murong Chuyi's features and his dauntless and intimidating air, there was an ethereal quality about him. He was like those dragon ladies in the picture books, or billowing snow in human form. In short, he was good-looking. In more detail, he was well worth looking at. Gumong patiently watched him for an hour with his cheek still pressed to his hand. But no matter how worthwhile his face, Gumong found that he could not keep looking at it after that hour had passed. He turned to Fando. "Do we really need to keep watching over him like this? I don't mind, but Princess is still at home, waiting for me to cook fish for him." Fando barked exuberantly. Gumong nodded. "You're right. Dragon Lady is an outsider, but Princess is one of us. We should catch the fish first. Anyway, I've already fed him the plant. It's not our fault if he doesn't wake up." Fando barked again. And so Gumong went back to catching fish in the pond. The 3 fat grass carp he'd caught had escaped when Murong Chuyi's water strike knocked him over. His luck this time wasn't so good. Despite extensive hunting, all the fish he netted were small and bony. Sunset was drawing near, and smoke was rising from the chimneys of the capital. Gumong couldn't help but feel glum. He hadn't imagined he would return empty-handed after so much effort. He stood by the lake, leaning on his net. The setting sun was like rouge rinsed from the boundless sky, shimmering across the ripples on the water. No way, Gumong sighed. Don't all the books say that kindness is rewarded? I've saved the little dragon lady, so why aren't there plump fish jumping into my hands in gratitude? And little dragon lady has a footnote. Xiao Long Niu, literally little dragon lady, is a character from Jin Yong's classic wuxia novel Return of the Condor Heroes, who is described as ethereally beautiful and dressed in white. As Gumong pondered this, a voice crisp as clinking jade came from behind. What are you babbling about? Gumong jumped in surprise. He whipped around and skittered backward in one jerky motion. You're awake? Why are you always sneaking around so quietly? The man who had soared over the waters was, of course, Murong Chuyi. His manner was back to normal, and betrayed not a hint of his recent fainting spell. Gumong remarked, that heart balm sure was effective. You recovered so quickly. Murong Chuyi snorted softly and gracefully flew ashore. Those phoenix eyes swept Gumong from tip to toe. Noticing that his clothes were still soaked, Murong Chuyi lifted a finger and golden light flashed once more. When it dimmed, Gumong touched his newly dried clothes in surprise and delight. Thank you very much, he said with a grin. You're a very kind person. Murong Chuyi wasted no more breath. You came to catch fish today? Yes, the princess at home is sick and can't eat anything, so I wanted to catch a fresh and plump fish for him. Gumong rubbed his nose. Family needs to help each other out, after all. Murong Chuyi's sharp brows dipped slightly. Princess, he paused briefly. Princess Mengzi. Gumong waved his hand no. It's Princess Moshi. I think now is a good time to point out that when you're speaking in Chinese, he and she sound exactly the same. They're written differently, but they sound the same. So that's probably why Murong Chuyi didn't go like him. Murong Chuyi fell speechless. So this amnesiac beast of the altar wasn't being nasty, calling him a little dragon lady. Apparently, he'd somehow bestowed the ruthless god of war, Moshi, with the nickname Princess. Murong Chuyi looked away from Gumong, his features betraying nothing. He stood at the edge of the lake with his hands behind his back, facing the wind head on. Come ashore, he commanded. Confused, Gumong waded out the water, using the pole of his fishing net for leverage. What kind of fish do you want? Murong Chuyi asked. Gumong was still lost, but sincerely responded, Perch. How many? The more the merrier. Too many would be wasteful, Murong Chuyi said. I think 5 is sufficient. What are you doing? Gumong wondered out loud. Helping me nab some fish? Na was honestly an insulting descriptor for what Chonghua's ignorant immortal, Murong Chuyi. Nab was honestly an insulting descriptor for what Chonghua's ignorant immortal Murong Chuyi was about to do. He was a master artificer, after all, whose command of the art could not be fathomed by even the likes of Yue Juntian. With a gentle swish of his sleeves, a silver arrow materialized from thin air and shot into the water. It vanished into the depths of Peach Blossom Lake. When it broke the water surface again and returned to shore, it was over 10 feet long, with 5 fresh, plump peach blossom perch strung upon it. Gumong's eyes widened, clear as blue glass. He looked at the fish, then turned to look at Murong Chuyi. After a long beat, he uttered one simple, crude phrase to express the reverence he felt. Holy shit. Of course, it would be one of the vulgarities formerly favored by General Gu. Seriously, all his hard work had been outdone by a single sweep of the sleeves and flick of the fingers from Murong Chuyi. With a crook of Murong Chuyi's finger, the fish flew into the basket on Gumong's back, and the silver arrow vanished. If there's anything else you want, speak now, Murong Chuyi intoned. Gumong shook his head as he stared at this beautiful, white-robed man with his face to the wind in the golden light of dusk. Gumong was a frank person. He said whatever he thought. No wonder Little White Bird worships you. Murong Chuyi's brow furrowed slightly. White Bird? I mean, Yue something. Vexed, Gumong clutched his head. Ah, I forgot his name again. Yue Chunqing? Mm-hmm. That's the one. Gumong clapped and smiled. No wonder he chases after you all the time. Daga, you're so awesome. Could you teach me how to go swoosh, 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 and catch fish like that? After a moment's pause, Murong Chuyi sighed softly. Give me your hand. Gumong did as he was told. Murong Chuyi summoned a handful of silver needles from who knows where and placed them in Gumong's palm. What's this? Voice-obeying arrows, said Murong Chuyi. I've given you 50. This arrow can change size at will and obeys spoken commands. Will that be enough for you to fish with? Overjoyed, Gumong thanked him profusely. Yes, you're so generous, and such a nice person, too. He cautiously tipped the needles into his Qiankun pouch, then carefully put the pouch in his robes, like a puppy working awfully hard to hide a meaty bone. Once the arrows were safely stowed, he said again, Thank you, kind person. Murong Chuyi didn't reply. He wasn't used to being thought of as a kind person. The people of Changhua saw him as standoffish and aloof, merely Changhua's infamous ignorance who pursued artificing with single-minded fervor. He's not beating the Chuaning allegations. His expression became stiff and unnatural, and after a brief silence, he changed the subject. You mustn't tell anyone what you saw today, especially Yue Chunqing. Do not tell him. Gumong nodded. No problem. But there's one person I'm afraid I can't hide it from. Who? Mo Shi, Gumong replied. Medicine Master Jiang said heart balm can be used as poison, so he'll definitely tell Mo Shi that I asked him for it. Murong Chuyi considered this for a moment. That's fine. I'll explain things to Shiha Jun myself. Think no further on it. Just remember to tell no one else. What if Mo Shi asks me before you tell him? You may respond with the truth. Okay, Gumong agreed. Still, he couldn't help but ask, You're okay now, right? I'm fine. The spiritual energy of Peach Blossom Lake is usually enough to suppress my symptoms. Today's episode was unexpected. Oh, but Little White Bird and the others, they don't know about your sickness? They know a little, but not much, Murong Chuyi replied blandly. It's not a major issue. Yue Chunqing will inevitably ask a bunch of questions, and I don't want to deal with it, so I'm asking you to keep it a secret. Murong Chuyi's story was full of holes, and his rationale behind the secret-keeping was so flimsy only a fool would believe it. But as things stood, Gumong was pretty much a fool. He swallowed it without question. He raised a hand and solemnly swore to Murong Chuyi that he'd never tell another soul. By the time Gumong took his leave and returned to the manor, night was approaching. Li Wei stood in the doorway, scanning the horizon. When he saw Gumong return at last, evening light like a red cloak upon his shoulders, he rushed over in exasperation. What's the matter with you? Were you catching fish or looking after them as pets? What kept you so long? Gumong took the basket from his back and showed it to Li Wei. I caught 5 fat fish. There's still time. Let me use the kitchen. Gumong had never prepared fish in all the time he had lived at Shiha Manor, but he knew what to do. The scraps of memory he'd recovered included plenty of instances where he'd cooked fish. After he'd worked his way through those particular recollections, Gumong swiftly prepared several dishes and arranged them neatly in a box. As he stepped out of the kitchen, he saw Li Wei waiting outside. Is he still in the study? Gumong asked. Yes, he went straight there as soon as court concluded and hasn't eaten a thing. Watch this, Gumong said, food box in hand. Shidi coaxing is my specialty. Wow, Liwei replied happily. But a second later, he realized Gumong's form of address wasn't right. He was being insubordinate again. He snorted in disapproval, but Gumong had already walked to the end of the corridor with a box of food. A lantern glowed in silence, its oil pooling on the copper base plate. Moshi's sharp profile shone in its halo of light. Although the northern frontier was stable for the moment, it wouldn't remain so. The armistice between the Liao Kingdom and Chonghua was a matter of necessity, not desire. The two nations had weakened each other through long conflict to the point that neighboring countries had begun to stir in action. If they continued waging a war of attrition, both would end up as easy prey for a third party. Thus, it was an armistice in name only. In truth, both countries remained at bitter odds, each eyeing the other to see who would recover first and most completely. The emperor had kept close watch over the Liao Kingdom's movements this year. The imperial report Moshi held was full of information gathered by Chonghua's spies, including intelligence on many demonic plants and objects from the Liao Kingdom. The contents were morbid, and Moshi's brow furrowed deeply as he read. Just as he came to some detailed notes about the flower of eightfold sorrows left behind by the demon race, the candle flame flickered. Gumong pushed open the door and strode right up to his desk. Moshidi, it's time to eat. After a pause, Moshi looked up. You can leave it there. Also, you're not allowed to call me that. How many times have I told you? Why can't you remember? Gumong ignored him entirely. Reasoning with this person was useless. It was better to meet force with force. Feigning deafness, Gumong opened the food box and lifted the dishes out one by one. Moshi frowned. What are you doing now? I'm not doing anything, Gumong said. You read your books, and I'll eat my food. I'll just leave half for you. Another pause. You want to eat dinner with me? Gumong blinked at him. Haven't we eaten together before? Moshi was silent. It was true that they had eaten at the same table in the Great Hall, but that was obviously different from sharing dishes from the same food box. It's not like I have much choice, Gumong said carelessly, mimicking how he spoke in his memories. There's nothing tasty left in the kitchen, so I have to steal some of yours. Shihajun, have a little mercy. Be magnanimous and share with me, okay? His vocabulary is getting so big. Moshi seemed rather stunned, so Gumong redoubled his efforts and added fuel to the fire. Also, I personally cooked all the dishes here tonight. Aren't you worried I might have poisoned it? I'll humbly go first and be your taste tester. That way you'll be able to properly enjoy your meal, your safety 100% guaranteed. Moshi stared at him. What are you even talking about? Still, he let Gumong do as he pleased. Gumong cheerfully plunked the simple meal he'd made, 4 side dishes plus soup, onto Moshi's spotless red sandalwood desk. The dishes were still piping hot, steaming and fragrant. Although they were uncomplicated stir-fries, nowhere near as sophisticated as the cook's usual handiwork, they smelled wonderful and looked bright and appealing. There was a dish of crystal pork terrine served with zhenjiang vinegar and fresh ground ginger. The meat was sliced very thinly, and the pork rind was soft and tender. Another plate held water caltrop and lotus root stir-fried with slices of celtus, the delicate texture of the caltrop striking a refreshing harmony with the jade-green celtus. There was also a dish of braised bamboo shoots, crispy and gleaming and generously coated with a glossy, savory sauce. In contrast, the soup was simple, a light and nourishing broth of 3 types of mushrooms, garnished with fresh greens and slivers of cured pork to add richness. I did not eat before this stream, and I should have. The final bamboo steamer lifted from the food box boasted a platter of sweet and sour perch. The fish had been sliced and prepared with a generous handful of julienned ginger to remove any odor. A splash of sizzling oil added a burst of flavor to the steamed fish, leaving the skin crisp golden and the fat meltingly tender. The dish was finished with a drizzle of sauce made with simmered sugar syrup and vinegar. At the touch of one's chopsticks, the rich, translucent flesh shimmered and trembled beneath a delectable veil of sweet and sour sauce. Yum! Gumong's chopsticks darted about in delight. He spoke aloud for the sake of Moshi, who was still reading with his eyes downcast. All the fish belly's mine now, he proclaimed, and continued to apply himself to his meal. As he reached to carve off the rest of the fish belly, which had the fewest bones and the most succulent flesh, Moshi finally couldn't stand it anymore. He shut the bamboo scroll as his fingers closed around Gumong's wrist. "What you doing?" Gumong asked, his cheeks bulging. Moshi glared at Gumong as he wrested the chopsticks from his hand and grabbed a bowl of rice. He picked up the prized piece of fish and dropped it into his own bowl. Secretly rejoicing, Gumong affected an exasperated expression. "Why do you have to steal mine?" Moshi returned the chopsticks to Gumong with ill grace and grabbed his own pair. "What did you expect? Am I supposed to wait for you to finish, then gnaw on the bones?" With that, he took a vicious bite of fish. Somehow, his white teeth and ferocious movements, coupled with this vaguely suggestive language, made Gumong shiver as he sat on the other side of the table. "To tear you apart, to drink your blood." His domineering manner and forceful gaze made Gumong's head throb. Memories of the two of them pressed skin to skin flashed through his head, making his blood pulse so rapidly it sounded like a bow had snapped right next to his ear. As if his body was desperate to tell him that, yes, there had been a time when this man, who looked so cool and aloof, had bared his teeth like a feral beast and possessed him entirely, devoured him whole. Gumong stared at Moshi's handsome face, his gaze sweeping from the high bridge of his nose down to his pale yet sensual mouth. His heart skipped a beat, surprising even himself. The revelation roused a strangely disagreeable feeling in Gumong's chest. It was hot and uncomfortable, as if a pile of spent firewood had been kindled back to life, or a patch of new seedlings had been gently uncovered by the spring winds of April. He suddenly thought back to those memories from the night Moshi came of age. Moshi's lips had been pressed to his own. Such a gentle touch, but it had left the old version of him shaking. Moshi didn't notice the unusual glimmer in Gumong's gaze. Focused on eating his fish, he absent-mindedly licked a bit of sauce from his lower lip. Gumong's chest erupted with scalding heat. He was filled with an indescribable urgency and primal desire. For some reason, he wanted to inch closer and gently touch Moshi's cheeks, his mouth. He had no understanding of what this desire implied. He felt that this fire had sprung to life in his chest like an instinct, and only by acting on it could he soothe his own agitation. Gumong swallowed and inched closer, like a cub sniffing for danger. Cautiously, he leaned in toward the wholly oblivious Moshi. That's the end of the chapter. And it's definitely break time. So I have to take a break before we continue that and find out what happens next. And also, like, I need to go eat something, but we just went from delicious food into, I should have known. I was like, what's up with the chapter name, Primal Desire? And I thought that, like, we weren't going to get to somewhere where I was going to understand it. And then, what do you know? When we come back, we're on chapter 75, which is called The Yuwu Clan's Old Affairs. Let's see if I can make the break screen happen. Okay. I will be right back in like 10 minutes. Hello. I am back. I just had a sandwich, which is not in any way equivalent to the delicious food they're eating in the book, but like it was something. So I'm happy about that. Hi, Barry. I'm glad you're here. And hopefully my audio doesn't do anything weird again. But I really think that the cord had just gotten like partly almost unplugged. But we will see. Okay, we're on page 101 for chapter 75, The Yue Clan's Old Affairs. By the way, Moshi looked up, interrupting Gumong's surreptitious approach. The 3rd of next month is Yue Chenqing's birthday. Ah? Gumong jumped, sweating with fear. He hadn't heard a single word Moshi said. Like a dreamer, startled awake, he looked away in panic, refusing to meet his eyes. Oh, okay, he murmured, touching his reddened earlobes. His heart was still pounding. What had he meant to do? Why did he suddenly feel such pressing need? Between wolves, biting each other signaled dominance and submission. But what did it mean between him and Moshi? Was it the same? He wondered if he longed to overpower Moshi, but he discovered he didn't know what would count as overpowering. Did he want Moshi to kneel to him? No, not that. He wasn't interested in that at all. Or did he want... Are you listening? Gumong came back to his senses. What? Yep, I'm listening. Moshi looked at him and frowned. Why are your ears red? Gumong scratched at them. It's because I'm hot. Moshi eyed him. He didn't know what Gumong's problem was, but he was almost finished with dinner anyway. He set down his chopsticks and said, We need to send Yue Chenqing a gift. I'm busy and can't get away from my responsibilities, so you and Li Wei can handle it. Gumong paused. Why are we giving presents to Little White Bird? Moshi's face darkened. Didn't you say you were listening? Must have missed it. The 3rd of next month, Moshi repeated, grinding his teeth, is Yue Chenqing's birthday. This time, Gumong finally understood. His eyes widened. It's Little White Bird's birthday? Moshi saw the sparkle in Gumong's eyes and was somewhat taken aback. He knew Gumong was fond of other people's celebrations. No matter if it was a birthday or a wedding, he loved nothing more than to join the fun. When Luo Li Jun's son got married recently, the majestic bridal procession had wound its way through the city. Gumong wasn't allowed to come and go as he pleased, but upon hearing the clamor of gongs and drums, he climbed onto the roof and sprawled on the tiles to eat melon seeds and watch the procession. He clapped and cheered with the passers-by, adding his voice and applause from the rooftop. After nightfall, Moshi allowed him to go outside, and he happily hunted for peanuts, pine nuts, and dried longans that had fallen between the cracks in the brick pavement during the day. Full of delight, he brought back an entire pocketful and even offered to split some with Moshi. I know what you're thinking, Moshi told the big rat, Gumong, but I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Huh? Yue Manor never arranges a great banquet for Yue Chenqing's birthday, so there won't be any candy or snacks tossed on the ground for you to collect. Sure enough, Gumong wilted. Oh, he murmured. After a pause, he curiously inquired, but Little White Bird is clearly very pampered by his family. Why don't they hold a banquet? Moshi took a sip of the hot soup. It's due to the circumstances of Yue Chenqing's birth, he replied. Yue Chenqing's mother was from the imperial family, and she passed away due to complications in childbirth. Gumong was taken aback, but he quickly put it together. So Yue Manor doesn't arrange a banquet for Little White Bird because Little White Bird's papa still hasn't forgotten Little White Bird's mama? Since when was Yue Juntian so faithful? There's no chance he would do such a thing out of respect for his deceased wife, Moshi responded blandly. But whether he would or not, Murong Huang was still of royal blood. Even if she died years ago, Yue Zhentian still has to honor the imperial family. That's why he keeps his own son's birthday as Spartan as possible. So that's how it is, Gumong mumbled. He ticked the names he knew off on his fingers and suddenly exclaimed, "So Murong Chuyi is also part of the imperial family?" "He doesn't count," Moshi replied. "What? Why? Isn't his surname also Murong?" "But Murong Chuyi's clothes are trimmed in silver," said Moshi. "Why do you imagine that is?" "Because white and silver suits him best, so he looks more handsome that way," Gumong responded in earnest. Moshi glowered. "Do you think this is a beauty contest?" "Well, why then?" "Murong Chuyi isn't of royal blood. He's an orphan who was taken in by Murong Huang, Yue Chunqing's birth mother, that is. In her youth, Murong Huang visited a temple on Mount Han, outside the city. She came across a child on the way who had been abandoned on the steps of the temple. She felt they were fated to meet, so she took him in as a little brother. She even petitioned the late emperor to bestow the imperial surname upon him." Under his breath, Gumong repeated a few snatches of Moshi's explanation to himself several times before he finally understood. His blue eyes widened. "So Little Dragon Lady was adopted?" "Stop giving people random nicknames." Moshi felt a headache coming on. "You might get away with it for Yue Chunqing, but if Murong Chuyi heard you call him Little Dragon Lady, he'd shred you alive and use the pieces as raw material in his artificing forge." Gumong waved a hand. "He's not that bad. Little Dragon Lady is a great person. Today, He cut himself off mid-word, realizing his tongue had slipped. He glanced apprehensively at Moshi, hoping he hadn't noticed what Gumong had just said. But fate never bowed to the whims of man. General Mo had the eyes of a hawk and the ears of an owl. So how could he have missed it? He stared at Gumong through narrowed eyes. "You saw him today?" Knowing he couldn't conceal this adventure from Moshi, Gumong helplessly crossed his arms and said in sycophantic tones, "Nothing can get past you, Shihajun. You're so wise. Don't try flattering me. How did you meet him?" Gumong had no choice but to tell Moshi how he had bumped into Murong Chuyi at Peach Blossom Lake. Remembering Murong Chuyi's warning, he kept the story brief and spared the details. He had expected Moshi would be at least a little surprised by the revelation of Murong Chuyi's condition, but Moshi only frowned and sighed. "How pointless." "What do you mean?" "Yue Chunqing came to see me a few days ago and asked to borrow a copy of the Liao Kingdom's Compendium of Plants Demonic and Divine. He said he was searching for a cure-all herbal medicine," Moshi exclaimed. "Unfortunately, I lent the book to the overseer at the Cultivation Academy 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if Yue Chunqing would ask him for it." Gumong blinked. "So Little White Bird has known about his uncle's symptoms for several days already?" "Longer than that," Moshi said. "He's known for a few years that his fourth uncle's had some health issues. One of the reasons he came with me to the northern frontier was to seek a cure beyond Chonghua's borders. But Yue Chunqing also knows Murong Chuyi can't stand the meddling of others, so he's done all his research secretly, behind his uncle's back." Gumong was stunned. So Little White Bird has known for ages. But then why did Murong Chuyi say he only knew the gist of it? "Murong Chuyi isn't wrong. Yue Chunqing knows his uncle is sick. He doesn't know what manner of affliction he suffers from. He can't find the specific cure, so he's looking for a panacea." Gumong was baffled. Why does Murong Chuyi want to keep hiding it from him? "They've never had a very good relationship," Moshi sighed. The Yue clan's family matters are a total mess. Gumong sat in silence and considered the tangle between Zhang Yexue, Yue Chunqing, and Murong Chuyi for a good while. In the end, he could only clutch his head and sigh. Too confusing. I give up. Moshi looked askance. What's too confusing? As he spoke, Gumong counted on his fingers. I'm trying to figure out why their relationship is bad. First, look at Murong Chuyi. He was a child taken in and brought up by Little White Bird's mama, so why would he dislike his sister's son? In the past, Gumong innately understood the ways of the world when it came to matters like these. But now, in his ignorance, he needed Moshi to explain it to him. It's very simple, said Moshi. To Murong Chuyi, Murong Huang was both a teacher and a sister. Although Murong Huang called him her brother, she treated him and cared for him like he was her son. When she married into Yue Manor, she specifically asked His Imperial Majesty to allow Murong Chuyi to accompany her. That's why Murong Chuyi lives with the Yue clan. Gumong nodded vigorously. I get it. In other words, Little White Bird and Little Dragon Lady are technically uncle and nephew, but in truth are more like big brother and little brother. Correct, Moshi said. Murong Huang was Murong Chuyi's benefactor. When she was alive, Murong Chuyi accompanied her day and night, listened attentively to her every word, and regarded her with the utmost love and respect. Naturally, he wanted her to have only the best home to return to as well. But Yue Zhentian, Moshi pursed his lips, unwilling to elaborate on his opinions of this person. But Gumong spoke clearly. He's a bad person. Back then, Yue Zhentian had a bad reputation, romantically speaking, explained Moshi. His parents and Murong Huang's had arranged their children's marriage long before, but Yue Zhentian was profligate by nature. By the time he was 16, he'd already gotten a Qin player with child, taken her as a concubine, and sired a son. Impressive, Gumong mumbled. Before he even married Murong Huang, he already had a concubine and a child on top of that. He pondered for a moment. Was that child Zhang Yexue? Moshi was uncomfortable discussing other people's dalliances. It was him. Then I understand why Little Dragon Lady doesn't like Zhang Yexue, Gumong said. Yue Zhentian took 2 wives. Murong Chuyi is the little brother of the first wife, Murong Huang, and so he's on the first wife's side. Zhang Yexue is the son of the concubine, and so he's on the concubine's side. Moshi had no wish to debate matters of wives and concubines. Lowering his lashes, he sighed softly. Yes, although such things aren't uncommon in noble families, it's just as you said. Murong Chuyi revered his foster sister and was greatly displeased with the marriage. Furthermore, with his disposition, Yue Zhentian would often make Murong Huang sad or angry. So Murong Chuyi has always had very complicated feelings towards this nephew of his, whose blood is half Yue Zhentian's. Moshi poured another 2 cups of hot tea, pushing one toward Gumong and holding the other in his hands. Still perplexed, Gumong said, I still don't really understand. Even if half of Little White Bird's blood is from someone he doesn't like, at least he's Murong Chuyi's sister's son. Don't people say, love both the house and its crows? Why doesn't he like a child his sister must have loved dearly? Because he thinks his sister wasn't happy. He believes that this child's birth was a mistake on top of a mistake. Steam rose from the tea in spirals, twisting like the old grudges they discussed. On top of that, there is another, more important reason. What's that? Asked Gumong. The complications with the birth didn't come out of nowhere, Moshi replied. From the moment Murong Huang married into the Yue family, she often fought with Yue Zhentian and lived in a state of constant worry. On the day she went into labor, A woman whom Yue Juntian had an affair with came to the manor to cause trouble and said plenty of vulgar things. Wurong Huang was already frail and on the verge of collapse. After this disturbance, her qi and blood circulation were badly affected. In the end, she lost all faith and passed away. Gumong let out a low sound of surprise. Moshi sighed. So, you see, both the marriage and its issue were mistakes. In the end, these events stole the most important person on earth to Murong Chuyi. This is something he can't let go of even after so many years. Now that he's a master artificer, Yue Juntian has tried to break the ice with him many times, but Murong Chuyi won't even give him the time of day. As for Yue Chunqing, Murong Chuyi has never known how to face him. After a pause, Moshi concluded, that's pretty much the story. Gumong still couldn't quite make sense of this complicated drama. Bewilderment showed in his azure eyes. After a long while, he spoke, puzzled. But Murong Huang's death isn't Yue Chunqing's fault. He was only a baby. Of course, Murong Chuyi understands that Yue Chunqing is blameless in all this, but understanding is not the same as forgiveness. Rubbing his chin, Gumong repeated Moshi's words under his breath. Understanding is not the same as forgiveness. His eyes flashed with confusion. Why does this sound familiar? You said it to me. Oh, you said it to me once. Really? Gumong exclaimed in wonder. Wow, I'm so amazing. Moshi said nothing. Seeing the pleased and self-satisfied look on Gumong's face, Moshi decided not to tell him that he gleaned this entire analysis of Murong Chuyi's psyche from Gumong himself way back when. People's hearts were complex. Moshi hadn't understood this when he was younger, nor could he easily make sense of the love and hatred between others, their affection and enmity. It was Gumong who carefully explained these things to him, who taught him the ins and outs of love and hate. In memory, Moshi saw how Gumong, head pillowed against his arms as he lay on the riverbank, had once brought up Jiang Yeshui as they chatted. Gumong had spat out the foxtail grass in his mouth and heaved a heavy sigh. Jiang Yeshui hasn't had it easy. To him, understanding and forgiveness are actually one and the same. See, after so many years, Murong Chuyi still treats Yue Chunqing so coldly because of his foster sister. Jiang Yeshui's mama passed away too, but he didn't fight with the other two. He can let go of the past and treat the two of them with courtesy. Good heavens, what a saint. If I were in his place, I might have gone insane. Moshi had turned to look at the stargazing youth lying beside him, his gaze full of tenderness. He knew that wasn't true. Even if Gumong had been in Jiang Yeshua's place, he would have also maintained his composure. He wouldn't have taken his anger out on anyone or blamed them unfairly. He would have treated everyone with kindness. After all, Gumong was bright and cheerful, like the sun. If someone clung to Murong Chuyi and cried, Murong Chuyi would push them away and leave with the sweep of his sleeves. If someone did the same to Jiang Yeshui, he would share in their sorrow and listen to them speak of their hurt. But Gumong? If someone was clinging to Gumong and crying, Gumong would definitely make them smile through their tears. The one who brought laughter and light to others. That was the Gu Shishong Moshi had always loved in his deepest heart. Several days later, Moshi finally wrapped up all the military affairs that had descended upon him after the spring hunt. It was truly fortunate that Gumong was there to look after him toward the end. Although Moshi procrastinated before every meal, he at least ate regularly and didn't put the medicine from Medicine Master Jiang to waste. On this particular day, Moshi had nothing to attend to. He considered if he should pay a visit to the Cultivation Academy and retrieve his copy of Compendium of Plants Demonic and Divine so that he could lend it to Yue Chunqing. Mo Shi pondered as he got ready. Although Yue Chunqing had been lazy ever since he was little, he had always treated his fourth uncle as his guiding star. When it came to anything involving Murong Chuyi, Yue Chunqing would spare no earnestness or effort. The child might have seemed unfocused, but in truth, he could be blindly obstinate once he was convinced of something. In the fearlessness of youth, a chest full of passion could hamper one's judgment. Hopefully, Yue Chunqing could stay out of trouble. Just as he was about to step out, Li Wei rushed into the hall, his face full of worry. "My lord, what happened? What's with that look on your face?" "Something's happened at Yue Manor," responded Li Wei. Mo Shi shivered, his heart pounding. How could it be? Speak of the devil. "Is it Yue Chunqing?" he asked. Li Wei's eyes flew wide. "It is, my lord. How do you guess? Young Yue Gongzi has disappeared." That's the end of the chapter. Henry, you are so right. More tasty Moshi autism evidence. Absolutely. I love the weird inception of him explaining things to Gumong that Gumong explained to him. Okay, we're on chapter 76, which is called Darkfire. That's a pretty short chapter, so I'm gonna read chapter 76, and then we're gonna finish for today. The Emperor sat within the golden throne room, his chin propped in one hand as he toyed with the string of jade beads in the other, listening to Yue Juntian's sniveling sobs. Your Imperial Majesty, Your Imperial Majesty, this old subject has but one true-born son. He is of half-royal blood. Your Imperial Majesty can't ignore this. If something happens to my son, then this old subject will. Upon saying these sorrowful words, he wailed bitterly and pounded his fist against the golden brick floor, snot and tears leaking down. The Emperor found the sight rather distasteful. He wrinkled his nose and narrowed his eyes. All right. What use is crying?" he counseled. "We didn't say we'd ignore it." Yue Juntian kowtowed repeatedly, his head thumping against the floor. "Many thanks to your Imperial Majesty. Many thanks to your Imperial Majesty," he cried tearfully. "I ask that your Imperial Majesty send for the invincible Northern Frontier Army to flatten the Dream Butterfly Islands and bring back my son." "Send for whom? You think that the Northern Frontier Army can be dispatched at will?" The Emperor was dumbfounded. People ridicule the idea of a mounted soldier sent across the world to secure a concubine's smile. "Surely you can't expect us to send 100,000 troops after a single man, can you?" And there's a footnote about sending soldiers across the world to secure a concubine's smile. Quote from a poem by Du Mu, a Tang Dynasty poet, criticizing the wasteful extravagance of Emperor Xuanzong sending military messengers to fetch lychees for his beloved concubine, Yang Guifei. Concubine's smile is a cultivar of lychee named for Yang Guifei. Hearing this, Yue Juntian began to beat his chest and stamp his feet once more. "Your Imperial Majesty." Wait, I didn't skip anything, did I? Yeah, no, I didn't. Okay, sorry. Hearing this, Yue Juntian began to beat his chest and stamp his feet once more. "Your Imperial Majesty, this old subject has led a lonely and painful life," he howled. "My first wife passed away early, and now my son—" "Stop bawling. We've heard your spiel hundreds of times since you entered the hall." The Emperor pressed a palm to his forehead. "Listen, we will definitely rescue him. But forget about summoning the Northern Frontier Army. That's a truly preposterous thought. Yue Juntian, snot dripping, was about to break into more wailing. On the verge of losing his mind with disgust, the Emperor hastily sat up straight and held up a hand. Enough, enough. We're sufficiently alarmed, okay? We will appoint Shihajun to this matter. Surely that'll appease you. Yue Juntian stiffened for a moment, his nose running in silence. He sniffled loudly, forcing those clear droplets back into his nostrils. But Shihajun is just one man, he mumbled. What if he doesn't succeed? After enduring Yue Juntian's pestering for an entire day, the Emperor had reached the limits of his patience. He couldn't believe Yue Juntian was still nitpicking his offer. Can you handle it then? Why don't you go ahead and fetch him yourself? Yue Juntian was a Grandmaster Artificer, but he had been afflicted with a mysterious illness several years ago. Although he had survived, his mind and body were no longer strong, and now that he was getting on in years, he couldn't walk even a mile without needing to take a long break. The idea of him reaching the Dream Butterfly Islands was pure fantasy. He was more likely to get killed on the way. Moreover, the man was selfish and had no regard for others. Years ago, when Jiang Yeshui had defied his will and made him lose face, Yue Juntian had kicked his son out and made trouble for him in 101 ways. Yue Chunqing was much more pampered than Jiang Yeshui, but how could he be more precious to Yue Juntian than his own life? Yeah, Henry, I also do not like him. He immediately shook his head, weeping. It's not that this old subject isn't willing. If I were still hale, I'd go at once to rescue my son from those accursed islands myself. But what? If you keep dawdling, your son's insignificant little life might just end. Right. Just Shihajun then. I'll be troubling Shihajun then. Yue Juntian could do nothing but agree. Thus did the Emperor summon Shihajun to the palace. Because Mo Shi had already heard Li Wei's report on this matter, he quickly grasped the situation as he listened to the Emperor's cursory summary. Although Mo Shi's opinion of this unfaithful old radish, Yue Juntian, was poor in every regard, Jiang Yeshui was one of his oldest comrades in arms, and their brotherhood ran deep. Not to mention that Yue Chunqing had served as his deputy general for 2 years. Of course Mo Shi wouldn't shirk this duty. It's just that the Dream Butterfly Islands are an archipelago. Do we have any definite news of Yue Chunqing's whereabouts? We do. Fortunately, we do, said the Emperor. Otherwise, this problem would be even more thorny than it already is. As he spoke, he summoned the last spiritual messenger bird that Yue Chunqing had sent. This was a fleeting creature of coalesced spiritual energy. The Emperor had cast protective spells upon it to preserve the details of Yue Chunqing's call for help, so even now the bird had yet to dissipate. As the Emperor mouthed the words of the incantation, the messenger bird's beak opened and closed. Yue Chunqing's voice came through, weak and shaking. Fourth uncle, Papa. At the sound of his son's voice, Yue Juntian burst anew into sobs, thumping his chest and stamping his feet. I'm stranded on the Dream Butterfly Islands. It's dark everywhere. It's dark wherever I look. I'm starting to have dreams. Yue Chunqing sounded tearful and terrified. I don't know how long I can stay awake. I don't know what they want with me. Please save me. Fourth uncle, Papa, save me, he whimpered. It hurts. My blood. They want... Mo Shi never heard what it was they wanted. Yue Chunqing had exhausted his spiritual energy and couldn't record anything more. The Emperor wound his string of agate beads around his wrist. Does Shihajun have any thoughts? After a moment of consideration, Moshi spoke. The Dream Butterfly Islands are demonic islands uninhabited by humans. The monsters that live there are temperamental, and it's difficult to judge their powers. Under normal circumstances, cultivators wouldn't go there unless they had no other alternative. However, he paused. According to folk tales, the Dream Butterfly Islands are composed of around 20 islands. Different types of demons live on each one, with a wide range of disposition and character between them. Yue Chunqing mentioned 3 pieces of information. First, it's dark everywhere. Second, he's having dreams and might not be able to maintain consciousness. Third, the demons seem to be interested in his blood. The Emperor was quite intrigued. Smiling, he stroked his chin. So if Shihajun were to guess, which clan of demons has taken our Yue Chunqing hostage? The bats, said Moshi. Yue Juntian made a soft sound, his lips white as he trembled. Bats, bats, yes, yes. There are records of a vampire bat island among the Dream Butterfly Islands. He burst into tears. Oh God, my son, my beloved son. But this is just a guess. Our most pressing task should be to scout the Dream Butterfly Islands as soon as possible. Taking this to mean that Moshi planned to depart soon, Yue Juntian hastily wiped his face and spluttered weepily. Many thanks to Shihajun. Many thanks to Shihajun. I'm not doing this for you, but for your esteemed son, Moshi replied coolly. There's no need to thank me. Yue Juntian's lips moved without sound. He knew of Moshi's friendship with Zhang Yeshue and understood his implication. Referring to Yue Chunqing as his esteemed son was a pointed reminder that he wasn't Yue Juntian's only son. There was also the son he had abandoned like an old shoe and harassed in every way, Zhang Yeshue. Seeing that the atmosphere between Moshi and Yue Juntian had become awkward, the Emperor coughed. This matter is an urgent one. Shihajun, return to your manor to make preparations and set out at once. Of course, said Moshi. One more thing. Keep this life crystal on you. The Emperor waved his hand, and a blue and white spirit stone appeared at Moshi's side. These life crystals were created from a drop of umbilical blood, taken at the birth of some of Chonghua's prominent nobles. The stones would glow day and night with a unique light until their owners died. In Chonghua's oldest stories, it was said that such a crystal brought good fortune to the newborn infant, and so many nobles had their own. This is Yue Chunqing's. Right now, the light still looks all right, so there's no need to fear for his life, the Emperor continued. Keep it on hand. Although it can't point the way for you, it can help all of you keep track of Yue Chunqing's status. Moshi knitted his brows. All of us? Oh, we forgot to mention, said the Emperor. 2 others requested to join this mission. They would not hear of staying behind. One is Murong Chuyi, the other is Zhang Yeshue. Moshi's eyes widened abruptly. They're coming too? At Moshi's expression, the Emperor replied, no need to worry about Qingshu Elder. He might not have use of his legs, but he's still a Grandmaster Artificer. His wooden wheelchair has many mechanisms for mobility. He won't slow you down. That's not what I meant. It's that, besides Gumong, who must remain under my supervision, I had no plans to take anyone else with me. The temperaments of these demons are strange and volatile. Many types of demons dislike any contact with humans. I'm afraid that the more people in the party, the harder they'll lash out in retaliation. It's just 2 people, the Emperor said. You're making it sound like there's a whole army accompanying you. If we tell you to take them, you will. There's strength in numbers. Moshi couldn't persuade the Emperor otherwise. All he could do was return to his manor and prepare for the journey. He hadn't much to pack, other than some basic talismans and spirit stones. His most important baggage was Gumang. There was no way Moshi could leave this troublemaker behind. Gumang's memories were all jumbled lately. He might remember something he shouldn't at any time. If Moshi wasn't at his side when it happened, the consequences would be hard to predict. He had to admit there was a second reason. Gumang's fall from grace and subsequent act of treason had both taken place when Moshi was absent. After all that had happened, deep down, Moshi very much feared the thought of a long separation from Gumang. "Where are we going?" Gumang asked as Moshi packed his Qian-kun pouch. "To rescue someone," Moshi responded. "To rescue Little White Bird?" "Yes. Just us?" Moshi's hand stilled as he turned to look at Gumang. "No. Murong Chuyi and Zhang Yeshui are coming as well." He could hear the apprehension in Gumang's voice. Moshi knew he didn't like interacting with strangers. "Are you afraid of them?" "If it's those two." After giving it some thought, Gumang said, "Then it's okay." When Moshi and Gumang arrived at the roadside departure pavilion outside the city, they discovered Murong Chuyi and Zhang Yeshui waiting for them. It was a truly bizarre situation. Zhang Yeshui and Murong Chuyi were enemies who wanted less than nothing to do with each other. Murong Chuyi in particular refused to spare Zhang Yeshui one glance more than necessary. But right now they shared a goal: to carry out this rescue with Shihajun. One of them sat under the departure pavilion, while the other stood under the pear blossom tree beside it. Across this intimidating distance, they were talking. Moshi was too far away to overhear what they said, but the hostility emanating from the exchange could be felt 10 leagues away. Especially Murong Chuyi. He was attired in his customary silver-trimmed white robes, standing with his hands behind his back. As his ethereal silk ribbons fluttered in the wind, his handsome and elegant features were cold as if covered in a layer of bitter frost. As Moshi and Gumang drew near, the other two fell silent. Qingshu Elder, Murong Xiancheng. Gumang copied Moshi's greeting. Qingshu Elder, Murong Xiancheng. In the few days since they had last met, Zhang Yeshua's face had thinned considerably, and faint shadows were visible under his eyes. Ever since Yue Chunqing's disappearance, he had been so distraught he could neither eat nor sleep. "Shihajun," he said. He turned to give Gumang a small nod, which could be considered a greeting. As for Murong Chuyi, he had never been bound by the conventions of etiquette. When his mood was poor, he ignored everyone without exception. In this delicate atmosphere, the four set off on their journey. The Dream Butterfly Islands weren't far from Chonghua. With 2 artificers in their party, there was no need to travel by sword. Zhang Yeshui retrieved a tiny walnut from his Qian-kun pouch. When he tossed it onto the ground and cast a spell, it transformed into a swift boat that could sail among the clouds and traverse 10,000 miles in a day. Zhang Yeshui invited Moshi and Gumang onto the boat, and then turned to Murong Chuyi, who still stood beneath the flowering tree. "Chuyi, you taught me to build this boat a long time ago. I've altered the design a little. Now this ship can carry 100 or more people. Come take a look." But Murong Chuyi said stiffly, "I'll not take a single step onto your boat. No need to trouble yourself, nephew." Gumang, leaning over the ship's railing, pondered Murong Chuyi's words. A thought belatedly occurred to him. He pointed at Murong Chuyi, then at Zhang Yeshui. "He calls him nephew?" He then pointed at Zhang Yeshui, then at Murong Chuyi. "And he's his uncle?" Gumang turned to look at Moshi. "Right, I remember now. That's indeed their relationship. But I couldn't tell it all. This uncle looks to be about the same age as his nephew." Don't talk so much, Moshi admonished. Let's go into the ship's cabin. But it was evident that Murong Chuyi had already heard what Gumong said. For some reason, his face became even frostier than usual. Chuyi, you... Zhang Yeshue began. To whom are you speaking? Murong Chuyi cut Zhang Yeshue off, his sharp brows drawn severely together. Zhang Yeshue, you were born of Yue Juntian's concubine, he stated, tone chilly. In terms of seniority, you should address me as uncle. You and Yue Chunqing are both of the younger generation. When addressing me in this manner, don't you feel you've forgotten yourself? Zhang Yeshue paused. Yes, Xiaojiu is right to teach me. And Xiaojiu is youngest maternal uncle. Murong Chuyi let out a snort and raised a hand to twirl a flower between his fingers. The pear blossom that had landed on his shoulder transformed into a beautifully decorated Jiangnan pleasure boat. This spiritual ship could also fly, just like Zhang Yeshua's walnut ship. Murong Chuyi stepped onto the pleasure boat, his tall, upright figure disappearing behind a flaxen curtain. Zhang Yeshue was silent a moment. He turned back to speak to Moshi. My apologies. I've embarrassed myself in front of Shihajun. Moshi shook his head and murmured a few words of consolation. As the two ships entered the sea of clouds, Moshi sat in the cabin, listening to the wind outside. Even now, he couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. The way Zhang Yeshue spoke to Murong Chuyi was too odd, as if he were hiding some secret that onlookers wouldn't know. And whatever the secret was, it seemed to cause Murong Chuyi a great deal of consternation, to the point that he deliberately pressed the point of seniority, despite usually paying no mind to such worldly convention. As a result, Murong Chuyi not only refused to enter Zhang Yeshue's boat, his phoenix eyes had also flashed with some kind of unspoken warning. I am the superior. You are the inferior. I am the respected elder. You are of the younger generation. I will not tolerate your trespass. Moshi furrowed his brow. Why would Murong Chuyi want to emphasize this boundary so pointedly? And that's the end of the chapter. Also, what's a pleasure boat? I didn't think Murong Chuyi would have a pleasure boat. So, that's something. We are gonna pick up next time on Monday with, chapter 77, which is called Burgeoning Passion. So that's fun. You know, that's a fun time right now to be having burgeoning passion while you're on this mission to rescue somebody. Okay. Blue, basically a fancy rich people boat. Okay, that makes sense. Henry, walnut shooting towards the sky. That's what the walnut boat is named. That's what we're gonna call the boat. The most dangerous man in the nation is Moshi's pet bottom. Why? Henry, you're just in here with, banger after banger. I can't deal. This is a very interesting turn of events. Yeah, I'm really excited to pick back up. I'm mad that we have to wait until Monday to find out what's happening next. Yes, you're the resident jester. Well, thank you all so much for coming to the stream today, and I will see you on Monday. We'll pick back up in the boats in Walnut shooting toward the sky. So, have a good day, have a good week, and I will see you next time.